Okay, moving on. We are getting to the end of A Prophet for Today by Rabbi Stephen Przansky. We're discussing now the division of the land of Israel to the Shvatim, to the tribes. And if you remember from last week, there was a question was, how would the land be divided fairly? That was really the issue. So, should it be divided by the biggest tribe gets the biggest piece of land? Should it be divided equally among all the tribes, which meant that each family in a bigger tribe would get a smaller piece of land, and a smaller tribe would get a bigger piece of land? Or should it be that each family is getting roughly the same size piece of land, which would mean that the smaller tribes would have smaller territories and the large tribes would have bigger territories? Should it be taken into account the quality of the land? Some land is more fertile than other pieces of land. What were the issues, right? And we heard many different opinions. We understand that there were two major miraculous elements in the process, and they complemented each other in the division of the land. One was that they consulted the Urim V'Turim, the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. And it would light up, giving indications of the 12 stones, which represent the tribes, but also the letters of the Jewish alphabet, indicating answers to questions that it was given. And the answers obviously were answers from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from God. And the other element was they used a thing called the Garel, a lottery, where they put the names of the tribes and the properties of the land of Israel, and they drew out which tribe would get which lot. Now, interestingly enough, it seems that the two matched perfectly. The Urim V'Turim and the Garel agreed in every choice, and if you think about it, there were at least 144 possibilities. So the fact that they matched, because there are 12 tribes and 12 sections, right? That indicated a certain continuity, a certain miraculous result for folks. So we're now up to, we've heard opinions from the Malbim. I'll go back one paragraph, okay? The Malbim adopted a contrasting view from the Ravad that the Urim V'Turim and the lottery allocated to the tribes and provinces of varying dimensions and attributes. Yehoshua then, with the tribal heads, made territorial adjustments in order to accommodate the needs of the individual tribes. So the Urim V'Turim and the Garal, the lottery, indicated general statements about sections of land. But then the borders of each place would have to be either reduced or expanded into a neighboring area because of the size of the tribe. And that was a negotiated process between the tribes. It's very human, right? Is that a smaller tribe would have to accept that its borders would be reduced so that its neighbor, which was a much bigger tribe, could have a little bit more land. You can see the potential problems for this because the smaller tribe might say, well, wait a second, today we're smaller. It could be, we're going to have a lot more children than they are, right? And we'll be bigger later, and then what's going to happen? So there had to be a very sophisticated negotiating process go on for this to work. Yehoshua then, with the tribal heads, made territorial adjustments in order to accommodate the needs of the individual tribes and the needs of each recipient family within each tribe. It was done through negotiation, not divine inspiration. So it was probably not easy. Similarly, the Abarbanel. Now, the Abarbanel is a very, very interesting character, right? The Abarbanel lived in the late 1400s. He was the treasurer of Ferdinand and Isabella at the time of the exile from Spain. And he was offered to remain there as a notary of the court, but he chose to leave with his people. He left originally to Portugal, and then I think he moved on again when they were expelled from Portugal shortly after. But his writings often reflect it's very interesting to read his commentary because he perceives the Torah through the eyes of somebody who is a minister of the court. in the sense that he is a politician, and he's a negotiator, and he's a treasurer of, the treasurer to Ferdinand and Isabella was a treasurer to the greatest power of its time. The Spain at the time of 1492 was at its peak as a great nation. And the Abarbanel was their treasurer, so his perspectives in examining the Torah and other things is he brings this unusual perspective to it of a person who is a member of the most powerful elements of a non-Jewish society. So let's see what he says. Similarly, the Abarbanel disagreed with all other commentators and argued that parity must consider both quantity and quality, as well as the distinction between lands already conquered and lands yet to be conquered. It sounds like somebody who is a minister of the court. Thus, the provinces allotted to each tribe factored in all these calculations in order to minimize disputes. After the provinces were distributed, Yehoshua, Eleazar, and the elders of the tribes determined subjectively the final distribution of tracts to each individual family. To further refine the process and produce an equitable result, as equitable result as was possible, Yehoshua added land to some and subtracted land from others. It is clear then how the division of the land consumed a total of 7 years. So it's not surprising it took them 7 years. It took them 7 years to conquer, and then 7 years to divide it up. And by the way, in the first 7 years, they didn't actually finish conquering all the land. They actually divided land that they didn't have yet, in fact, with the idea that, okay, now this is no longer the responsibility of the army of Israel to conquer what's remaining. This is the responsibility of the tribe of Yehuda to do it, or this is the responsibility, of the tribe of Dan to finish this conquest. Right? It fell under the category of a holy war, a war of conquest as part of the land of Israel, even though it wasn't being done by the entire nation, but rather by the individual tribes to which it was allotted. The one serious complaint lodged against the process came to Yehoshua from guess where? Anybody want to guess who complained about how it was going? There was one tribe that complained.
About division.
About the division.
The girls.
The girls.
The girls.
No, there was a tribe. There was a tribe. No, they didn't disagree. They were okay. They were good.
No, but they didn't get the...
Because they didn't have the boys in the...
They didn't have men.
But they married it. They did have men. It's in the Tanakh it says it. It says it in the Parsha who they married. They married in their own tribe, which is what the requirement was.
But when it was division, they didn't get it. Because we don't have male in our family, so why don't give it to us?
No, this is in the Torah. By now they were okay. Yeah. No, but it was a whole tribe that complained. Which tribe do you think would be the one that would be unhappy? Everybody else was okay.
Rabbi didn't get.
No, Yosef. No, not Yosef.
Yosef.
You got it.
It's Menachem,
Ephraim and Menashe.
Ephraim and Menashe, right? And where does Yehoshua come from? Does anybody remember? Ephraim. The one serious complaint lodged against the process came to Yehoshua from his own tribe, the tribe of Yosef, which resented both the relatively small territory given to their populous tribe, as well as the allocations to them of primarily unconquered land. So they're unhappy. You've given us land the Canaanites still have, right? And not enough of it. It's the Jewish complaint at the restaurant, right? This food is terrible and the portions are so small, right?
Yeah.
That was their complaint. After 14 years in the land, they had lost their will to fight, preferring, understandably, to settle, build, raise their families, and prosper. To Yehoshua, they addressed only the first issue. Quote, "Why have you given me an inheritance of a single lot and a single portion, seeing that I am a numerous people? For Hashem has blessed me to such an extent." All right, you gave us so little, right? And we're so big. Ephraim is a very big tribe. The mountain is insufficient for us, and all the Canaanites that dwell in the land of the valley have iron chariots. Iron chariots were the great, powerful force at the time. It was like saying they have tanks. How do you expect us to win? In response, Yehoshua addressed only the second unspoken issue, the desire to wage war in the land of Israel. If you are such a numerous people, ascend to the forest and clear the area for yourselves. There, in the land of the Perizi, and the Rephaim, you have great strength. You shall drive out the Canaanite, even though they have iron chariots and are strong. So his reaction is, stop whining, get to work. It was a pointed and timely reminder to his tribe, and by extension to all of Israel, that the distribution of the land of Israel did not end the conquest or the struggle for the land. It was a continuation of the conquest and the very beginning of the struggle, which to this day has not ended. The goals of the division of the land. One crucial matter remains for discussion. What was the intent of the distribution of the land? On the surface, it seems very prosaic, commonplace political process, analogous to a havdil, the allocation of the territories and the drawing of maps by the colonial powers and the League of Nations after World War I. We're actually seeing the results of that today. Is in the Middle East, there were very artificial countries created, right? Transjordan, what was that? Iraq was not a separate country. Lebanon, really didn't have its own. It seems that the only true nations that existed as nations prior to and saw themselves as national entities were in fact Persia, Iran, Egypt, right, and Israel, all of which had a very ancient history.
And who lived in Babylonia?
Right. It's certainly not the Babylonians.
No, the Babylonians.
No.
Assyrian, no?
What?
Assyrian.
Yeah, the Assyrians probably were the last conquerors, but they didn't control Iraq at all, and Iraq was divided entirely artificially from Iran, by the great powers at the time, and they were, the Jordan is, a Hashemite kingdom. It's a Bedouin
Damascus,
kingdom.
It was just city, no country. Damascus.
No, Syria had a history, and Damascus did have a Muslim history to it. It was a Muslim center of learning. Right?
Syria even today, it's all just small tribes.
But again, it was a very tribable place. Very tribal place. It didn't have a national. Syria as an entity.
What about Lebanon? You just mentioned Lebanon. King Shlomo, he was getting wood from Lebanon.
That's right. Lebanon had a history, but it wasn't. Modern Lebanon was not the same people at all. And even today there's this argument with, ISIS wants to destroy the pyramids.
Of course.
Right? Because of the identification with something that is pre-Islam. Right? Is the reason. And they see it as the worship of Avodah Zarah from their Wahhabdi. ISIS. It's what was done by the Taliban in Afghanistan when they destroyed the Buddhas.
Yes, that's right.
Right, as well. Okay. One crucial matter remains: what was the intent of the distribution of the land? On the surface, it seems like a very prosaic, commonplace political process, analogous to the allocation of the territories and the drawing of the maps by the colonial powers and the League of Nations after World War I, and a similar process undertaken by the United Nations after World War II. For sure, the essential difference was that the distribution of the land of Israel was based on Hashem's wisdom, which guided the entire process. But on what basis was it determined which tribe would be settled in which province? What were the considerations, such as we can ascertain, that Hashem willed that, for example, the tribe of Zevulun should be granted a province in Akko on the coastal waters? The ultimate goal of the settlement of the land is to implant a holy people on a holy land. How is this desire reflected in the process, and what are the implications for today? For instance, Zevulun we know is famous as a seagoing tribe.
That's right.
That they travel over, they're a merchant. So it makes sense, it would seem, to give them a coastal province where they can use their ships. But maybe it's the reverse. Maybe whoever had the coastal province would be seagoing.
Where did they have ships in the desert?
That's the question, right? Is that
how you decided that?
how was it decided that they had a merchant quality, a traveling merchant quality? It's an interesting question, and one has to ask the question: did they get this quality because they had a seaport, or did they become this way because they had a seaport? You know, there's a board game. I don't know if anybody's ever played it, called Diplomacy. It's a very interesting game, right? Let me just give you a very rough sense of it because it applies to this question. Diplomacy is a map of Europe and what today we call the Middle East, pre-World War I, right? So you have the great empires of the Tsar, of the Austro-Hungarians, of the Ottomans, of who was it that united the German nation? What? It begins with his name begins with a B.
Bismarck.
Bismarck, right? The Germany of Bismarck's time. The French and the British and the Ottoman Empire. Right? 7. So there's 7 players. Each player gets to play a country. Every country gets 1 navy and 2 armies, and they get food depots. And the goal of diplomacy is to conquer the world. Quite straightforward. And the rules say at the beginning, because it's about diplomacy, truth is not an issue. You can make promises and break them. You can lie to people. It's okay because you're like a diplomat, right? It's okay. Now, what's interesting about the game, I played it. It was very popular in the late '60s and '70s.
Yeah.
They used to. My brother played it at Harvard, and they had one room that they would play it in that was locked, because sometimes it takes months to finish the game, right? And one day somebody broke into the room and moved the pieces around, took some pieces, and there was a big debate as to whether that was permitted, right? Because it's diplomacy, right? But it's a very interesting thing because the characteristic of the person, England gets 2 navies and 1 army. Everybody else gets 2 armies and 1 navy. England is an island. Right? And people who are very kind of defensive oriented in nature always want to get England. They'll trade their countries for England. I have the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I will give you the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire in exchange for England because I really, by the way, there's a lot of kind of peacenik thing going on at that time, right? Right? Early 70s. So I really don't like to be an offensive person. I'm in favor of peace. So I want to be England. Right? And England, by its nature, had to be defensive because it had great defenses, because to conquer England, you had to cross the sea.
Right.
Not easy, right? Germany, by its definition, had to be a very offensive player because it was caged in the middle of Europe, right? In order to grow, it had to conquer other places. It couldn't just sit there because it would be conquered, right? So the nature, very often, of a people is determined by their geographical position. So maybe Zebulun had no interest in being sailors at all. But this is the piece of land they were given, and they said, okay, here's an opportunity. And they became famous as a seafaring tribe. Let's see what it says. Okay.
What's the name of the tribe that was scribes? Issachar.
Yeah.
No, that's
and they had a trade with Zebulun, right?
How they became scribes? We are talking about slaves. They didn't know how to write.
No, they were studying Torah, and so from there, the same as like Yaakov.
Well, they had 40 years. They had 40 years.
The same as Yaakov.
The generation that came out of the desert.
So Issachar also was studying.
Right.
Yeah, but still the entire...
No, we don't have any record of them studying it in Egypt.
Only Levi.
Yeah.
Only Levim studying Torah, but the
Yeah.
entire tribe became scribe. They
All
also
of them went to the fine graphics school. Easy.
they're so
Well, first of all, you have to remember that the process of, even in the time of Purim is coming up, right? It describes how they transmitted information. They had rooms of scribes, right? And they would put something up, right? And the scribes, which are, in those days, they had to do it in many languages, right? Because Persia had many languages, right? And the scribes were also translators, right? But they would all sit there, and write whatever it was. If you wanted to publish 1,000 edicts, you had to write it 1,000 times. There's no carbon paper.
yeah.
Take it to the photocopy
Again,
machine.
we're talking tribe. We're talking about big family. It's like one huge family.
Yeah, and this is what you do. You can write. If you couldn't write, you had to carry ink back and forth. You could sharpen quills.
Because I cannot understand why they just take some small family, husband, wife, and kids, and give them property. Why the entire tribe has to have this piece of
No,
land?
but by the way, they also had to farm. Everybody had to farm. Even the Levium farmed in their cities. There was no Rami Levy.
Yeah, but you see, I think it just makes more problem because people, even in the family, they will fight for the more property.
It seems that that's why it took 7 years. Right? Because they weren't
no,
just...
but I'm talking about, for example...
They weren't in those 7 years, they weren't just dividing the provinces. They were dividing... They weren't just dividing the nation into the provinces. They were also deciding what families would have what plots of lands. It was all going on during the 7 years. Remember, everybody returns to their family plot when the time comes. People say that about cemeteries. But when Yovel comes, everybody returns to the plot that they were given. Right? And that was the original plot. So that was being determined during these 7 years. And I suspect it was very tough negotiation.
Plot.
What?
How we will know?
What, for Yovel?
No, how Mashiach will know which plot belongs to whom?
No, but
Probably he knows.
David, but right now in Israel, people don't live by the tribes, where the sections, where the
Right.
tribe.
And we don't have Yovel.
No, we don't have. No,
Right.
I know. Yeah, the Jubilee. Yeah. So and even now, so many people are coming to Israel here, but nobody lives by the tribe territory.
That's right. Well, nobody knows what tribe they're from.
Nobody knows. Well,
Right.
why. It's.
But this is all pre-Messianic times. Messianic times, we will know.
And there is another question. If they decided to give some land to Arabs, to Palestinians, don't they have to ask people who sit outside Israel?
That's for sure.
Excuse me, but we are part of, we got this, we have Halak in Israel, we have our part in Israel.
No, diaspora is not considered.
I think...
We're not Jews?
No, but we are outsiders. We don't fight for Israel here.
No, but hold on for a second. I think the problem with... You raise a very good point. That every Jew, at some point, should have a place in Israel that they return to, which is their homestead. So, when somebody decides to sell my homestead to a non-Jew, right? Do I expect that non-Jew to vacate at the time of Yovel? It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to this, but it seems to me obviously it's a problem. And every 7 years is Shemitah, right? Okay. So every 7 Shemitahs, 49 years, the 50th year is Jubilee, right? It's what's written on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, the cracked Liberty Bell. It says every slave shall go free and etc. That's from the parsha about Jubilee, right? So on the 50th year, not only are debts ended, and not only do slaves go free, and not only does the land and the farmer rest, but also everybody returns to their original homestead that was given at this time. Right? So in a sense, you could only sell land for 50 years. The 50th year, folks are coming home. basically. So the questions that are being asked here is, how do we manage that when Jews don't own that land, right? Or, by the way, even if they think they own that land, how do they feel when they're being moved, out because you're in Yehuda and you should be in Naphtali, right? So we do. So obviously there are a lot of logistical problems with this idea where we are right now. On the other hand, the question you're asking doesn't really apply until a temple is built, we have a Sanhedrin, and we're getting ready for Jubilee, because our cycle right now is not a 50-year cycle. Our cycle right now is a 49-year cycle. After the 7th Shemitah, we just start again. Why? Because Shemitah is a lot like Shabbos, in the sense that it comes every 7 years from the first day of creation onward. What?
Why we don't have Jubilee?
Because Jubilee is very similar to Hagim, right? Hag, we, the Jewish people, the Sanhedrin, decide when it's going to happen. Will it be on this day or this day?
I think it's
depending on the moon, right?
I personally think it's a little bit more practical. Because in Israel, not every farmer keeps Shemitah. Because if it's Jubilee, it's 49 years with Shemitah.
Yeah. Right.
Then you have Jubilee again. You can
another year without planting.
So it's 2 years.
Right.
Then the third year you're planting and then just on the fourth
it's the end of the third year.
So it's 3 years. It's not just 1 year. It's 4 years.
Yeah. Well, it's not just 2 years. It's actually
don't eat.
It's actually.
I mean, you don't work.
Don't have crops.
Yeah. So
you don't plant crops. So things grow even when you don't have crops.
In Israel, the modern Israel, because so many people they don't keep.
It wasn't. That's not.
I think that's why they just don't.
With all due respect, if you look at the Torah,
don't push envelope too much.
No, if you look at the Torah, you'll see it's very clear, right? Is that just as Shabbos is never declared, it doesn't depend on when the new moon is for Shabbos. The first Shabbos was on the 7th day of creation, and the second was on the 14th day. Right? And there was no calculation required, right? When it came time, when are we going to celebrate Rosh Hashanah? Somebody had to look at the moon and say, it's not out yet, it's tomorrow, it's the next day, right? They had to see it, declare it, witness it, and then the Sanhedrin would declare what was the Rosh Chodesh, right? And that's the significance of this being the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, was that the Sanhedrin would control time. The control of time would go to humanity, right? Not in terms of Shabbos, but in terms of Hagim, right? The same holds true with Shemitah. Shemitah begins with the first, year of creation, right? And it happens every 7 years, only in Israel. Yeah.
First year of creation, it was Shemitah?
Yeah. Well, no, it was the first year. The 7th year was, right? Okay. But Yovel cannot happen unless you have a temple and you have a Sanhedrin, right? And then at that point, they will declare this is the 50th year. The Sanhedrin will declare it.
So that's why I'm asking. Sorry, so the question like this right now is even irrelevant. I think.
I don't think it's. I think it's far from.
But I mean, it's too early.
If you ask the Chavetz Chaim, he would say no, it's not irrelevant. Maybe Mashiach will come tomorrow.
Right? I'm in, but
I don't know if we're. I don't know if we're in the 42nd year of a Yovel cycle, or we're on the 49th year. This is beyond me, right? And I don't know if they start counting based on the first Shemitah after the temple is built. I'm not sure of these laws, right? But what I'm saying is I don't think it's all irrelevant any more than it's irrelevant to be talking about, the building of the temple or finding Kohanim or finding Levim. We think that it's imminent. So I think the questions are very valid questions. Do I have the answers to them? No.
But David, there is so much during so many, all those years, there was so much ingathering of exiles and everything coming, and people are so mixed up, and everybody live. It's right now they have first to sort out this question.
But all that happens at the same time. It's not everything. Eliyahu will tell us.
Okay.
You know?
So
Eliyahu will tell us, the Jews and non-Jews are among us. He can make those judgments. It's not for us. But that's all part of the Messianic process. What family did I come from? What tribe did I come from?
Yeah.
Those things are, no, there's no way to trace that in the same sense. Or maybe there'll be some declaration that I can't imagine, which is also possible, obviously, because I don't imagine by definition.
This is the situation when it should be at least to my understanding, should be direct involvement of Kadosh Baruch Hu.
I think if you're saying that God should be involved with the coming of Mashiach, I think there's a good chance that will happen.
No. I mean, not only coming of Mashiach, but everything, building of the temple and all the separation and the territories and the properties and all that
the building
stuff.
of the temple, God told us to do. Build for me a Mishkan.
Right.
I will dwell within you.
I'm not saying.
Right? So, there are different opinions on this, but in terms of how the land will, we can see right here that men with a very close relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu were struggling for 7 years to try and find equity, in this process, right? With divine inspiration, with the Urim V'Turim, with the Goral, all those tools that they were used that were divine, and that will have obviously be a requirement going forward.
But the thing is, right now there are still before people, Jewish people were having more especially after Yetziat Mitzrayim and all that. People had more emunah and all this stuff. Right now, it's so diverse, and so many people.
You're going to come back to the same conversation that I have all the time. That's not really true.
I don't know. I'm not saying.
I would argue with you that the first redemption, the second redemption, the people who left Mitzrayim, for sure, had much less emunah. Much less emunah. There's no question about it. 49th level of Tumah. Another day they wouldn't have left, right?
Yeah.
So, let's not underrate ourselves, number one, and let's not try and create an impossible situation. We do not have to be, if everybody thinks that Mashiach will not come until there is no more Lashon Hara, and until there's Actus and all Jews are unified.
I say how it can be rectified, so that we do have, because there are so
because
much. Because
God will decide now is the time.
Because so much.
No, because what I'm saying is you're setting up your own bar that we have to cross in order to get to this point. But you're actually taking, God's role out of it. God will decide now is the day. It's going to happen, right? At the end, it's not going to be based on. It won't be based on our qualities at that moment. God will decide. This is now.
That's exactly what I said. That's why
because
it needs direct involvement of Hashem.
Yeah, and I said if you think that God will be involved in the coming of Mashiach,
I believe that's the
think
only
so.
way. I believe that's the only way.
But I think He is now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every day I think we see miracles from God. Especially in Israel.
No doubt about it.
So it should continue, and it should come soon.
All about?
Okay, so let's finish this page here. Okay, so how was this desire? The ultimate goal of the settlement of Israel is to implant a holy people on a holy land. How was this desire reflected in the process? And what are the implications for today? Obviously, the land of Israel was not divided by politicians, diplomats, cartographers, but by prophets and Torah sages, the leading scholars of the generation, who I should add, right, were politicians, diplomats, cartographers as well, right? The leading scholars of the generation. That was because the central objective was to ascertain the spiritual essence of each tribe and to allocate land to each tribe in accordance with each tribe's attributes and spiritual potential. The conquest of the land was not merely a technical act, but a union of the divine idea with the national idea. The full realization of the divine goal to have a holy people living in a particular locale, embracing a unique moral system, and serving as devoted representatives of God, ethical examples to the rest of mankind. This is a very important idea to understand, and it's almost hard to grasp outside the land of Israel, in the sense that the role of the unity between the people and the land, and the holiness of that unity, was tremendously important at the time of Yehoshua, and they were trying to make this fit. And just as, how many times have we heard, for everybody there is a place in Israel. There's so much variety in Israel. Everybody can find what they need there, right?
Sure.
It's exactly the statements that are made here. They're not talking about, gee, somebody can find a place close to Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about something deeper than simply physical environment that suits a person. And you hear from people, I want to, I often say, I want to live in the Galilee in Tzfat. I like the elevated quality of it. Some people say, I love Jerusalem, the fire, the excitement of Jerusalem, right? People like the Negev, But it's rarely about simply the climate in those situations. There's something much deeper to it. The provision of the land was not primarily intended to cater to the economic potential or aspirations of each tribe, but rather their spiritual needs. Yaakov, before his death, quote, blessed each tribe according to each one's appropriate blessing. That's from Bereshis. Mm-hmm. Yaakov's blessing was a prophetic designation of each tribe's unique character and what each tribe would contribute to the national enterprise. Accordingly, each tribe was matched through providence with the region that was most conformed to its nature and destiny, and would most benefit the nation as a whole. This is something that even Yehoshua could not determine unilaterally, because as a member of one particular tribe, even his motives would be suspect. Mm-hmm. The process had to be directed from Hashem in order to complement each tribe with that part of Eretz Yisrael from which it would be able to extract holiness. The land of Israel is valued not for its commercial potential, but for its innate spiritual qualities. A land that Hashem seeks out. The eyes of Hashem are always on it from the beginning of the year until the year's end. Rav Tzvi Yehuda HaKohen Kook explained the verse, and I will provide, literally feed you, the heritage of your father Yaakov, to mean that the land of Israel nourishes the Jewish people and gives us life. The distribution of land was therefore not a mechanical act that required only map drawing and settlement. It demanded physical conquest followed by an understanding of the distinctiveness of each plot and parcel and its applicability to the tribal character. Hence, the division took a full 7 years, and the names of the tribal regions are still used today. We recognize where those regions were. Yehuda, Binyamin, Menashe, Zevulun. There is a special character that is stamped on the land itself and was also a reflection of the tribal character. That is one reason why the Torah placed so much emphasis on ancestral land, its recovery by the owner forced to sell, and its reversion to the original owner under the defined parameters at the beginning of Yovel, the Jubilee year. Right? That it could not be parted from the person to whom it was given indefinitely. They had to be reunited at least once every 50 years. Mm-hmm. There are whole chapters of the book of Yehoshua from 13 to 21 that do little more than list names, many of which are unfamiliar to us today. But these are not mere names. Each name describes the quality of the place and the uniqueness of the tribe. We may not be able to deduce every concept to which the Navi is alluding, but assuredly it was a communication of great significance to the recipient who comprehended the message. When the family was designated for this area, they understood that this was a holy decision, not simply, oh, okay, he's good at, harvesting carrots. Millennia removed this process, and we can only grasp at the simplest correlation between the tribe and territory. For example, Zevulun the seafarer was given Akko at the coast, but no more. That precious insight into the land of Israel has been lost for now, and our absolute, unchallenged possession of the land is therefore incomplete. Right? In order to possess the land of Israel, we have to possess it on the level being described here. Mm-hmm. The matching of the spiritual nature of the tribe and the family to the matching of the spiritual nature of the property to which Yehoshua gave them originally. And that's why we have to return to that place, every 50 years. Similarly, we have a glimpse of the tribal character through the blessings of Yaakov, the type of stone that is represented each tribe on the Kohen Gadol's breastplate, the color and the design of each tribal banner, and the identity of the tribal hero who has reflected the tribal character in its most perfected form. But even, you have David for Yehuda, you have Moshe for Levi, Shimshon from Dan, right? They all represent certain qualities, of those tribes. But even our knowledge of the tribal personality is somewhat incomplete due to the length of exile and our concomitant separation from the land of Israel and the world of the tribes. Full comprehension of this indissoluble link, you can't dissolve this link, between the land of Israel in whole and in part, and the Jewish people as a nation and divided into tribes, still awaits the future redemption. When the land is fully revived and Jewish national life is rejuvenated according to the Torah, then we will appreciate in detail the integration of the people in the land. Then as well, the inherent connection and indivisibility of the land and the people will be embraced by all Jews and acknowledged by the international community. So I think he's addressing the question that you raised, is that when the time is right, it should be very soon, right? These things will be dealt with, right? And of course they will be dealt with in a godly manner. The focus of the post-Yom Kippur War settlement movement was not exclusively a political or nationalistic act. As a hostile world, and many Israelis perceived it, but an effort to once again revitalize the relationship between the people of Israel and the land of Israel, and so the character of the land can make an impression on the people and vice versa. The work of Ezra, originally, is always about the cradle of Yiddishkeit when he talks about Judea and Samaria. He's always talking about this was the cradle of Israel, when it began, and it's central in the Tanakh, right? And he's actually trying to raise in his movies and his books some of these thoughts that are here as well. By renaming these areas with biblical names and resettling these places with Torah-abiding Jews, the settlers attempt to bring to life the connection between the people and the land and rebuild the foundation that Yehoshua laid through the original division of the land. That their efforts are unappreciated by many and openly thwarted by some reflects the spiritual distance yet to be traveled by the chosen people and the desirable good and expansive land Hashem promised to our forefathers.
It all started in Judea, and it will continue be the same, because where was the Hebron? Where was it if it's not Judea?
So I'm wondering if we should hold here. The next sentence begins, there were shortcomings in the division as well. Right?
In whose vision?
In the division as well.
Division.
It was not done purposely. But maybe we should get to the shortcomings next week. Right? We know what all the potential problems are. We've talked about it. And let's see how they played out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think we probably have maybe 2 more weeks, and then we will finish. Yep.